So I've been working on getting FreeDOS to run on my 286 homebrew build here. And as a reminder, I have this IDE interface card with the very basic circuitry to connect to the ISA bus. And then I have an adapter to plug a CF card into that IDE connector into my ISA bus. And I'm going to go ahead and just pop that into the system at this point. And I'm going to turn on my system, and what you're seeing on the screen on the right is this debug output window. So that's connected to this nano that just gives me output if I want to write any debug output. The left screen is my VGA connector connected into my homebrew, very basic rudimentary VGA card. What you're seeing here though on the right is my normal, just what I'm using as a kind of a sanity check when I turn on the computer if things look like they're working right. So I check my SD card, I check the CF card for some of its basic information. I previously had a bug where I was not writing byte. So writing words I was fine, but when I wrote bytes, if they were on an even boundary, they weren't working quite right. They were actually messing up my odd bytes when I would write an even byte. Anyways, that's fixed, and this output has just helped me validate that that all looks good every time I boot up. I read my master boot record. It ends in AA55. That's another quick indicator that my CF card, at least the initial reading, is coming up okay, that I see kind of this block of text from my master boot record. And the way it works is that master boot record gets loaded, and then in it's going to jump over to the boot sector, and then the boot sector will load up my kernel. And then the kernel is going to load up the command interpreter, which in this case I'm using FreeCom. And you can see that on the left screen, FreeCom version 0.85a. And then I continue, and if you see any of these types of prompts, it's just showing me interrupts that have happened. And for now, I'm still outputting when interrupts 12, 11, or any unknown interrupts occur. It'll throw something out and beep at me, just so that I know something happened that I don't support yet. Maybe real quick before I get further into FreeDOS, I'll jump over to the code I've been working on. This is BIOS code. And so I have a file for interrupts related to disk I/O. So in here I have interrupt 13, which is the disk services. And you can kind of see here what I currently support. So these are the interrupt functions. So it's interrupt number 13, and then within interrupt 13 it's these functions that I support. So I have some of the basic reset, read. I have the extension version of those supported, so I can do things like LBA. So I have a check if those extensions are present, and I return that I do support those, and then I have the read sectors to support that functionality. And that's all working, I think, quite fine at this point. Now, in addition to the disk interrupt, and which is this interrupt 13, on the video side, interrupt 10 is where most of the video functions come in. And within that, I have a whole series. And any of these that start with B, these are ones I've made up. So I have my own custom functions within this interrupt, and FreeDOS wouldn't be using those. It doesn't know anything about those at this point. Maybe later I'll use those when I write my own code to run in FreeDOS, but for now you can ignore those. But these are the ones that I have implemented to some level. Some of these are just faking it. They just, for example, set cursor type. It takes in the request from FreeDOS and stores it, but then it really doesn't do anything with it. But some of these other ones, like a write char, write pixel, well, write char, write text, are getting used, especially write text. That's getting used quite a bit right now by FreeDOS. And then I also have, maybe some general ones, or at least ones I've put into this general file. So I have an interrupt that returns BIOS information as far as what equipment I have in the computer, how much memory I have. There is a bootstrap loader. It's interrupt 19 that I support. I don't think it's being used at this point. And then there's some real-time clock functions to get the date, set the date, get the time, set the time, and then also to read a counter or set a counter, which I don't yet have technically supported. So I'm kind of cheating, and every time FreeDOS goes and asks to read the counter, I'm supposed to check for delays. I just increment the counter a little bit. So it just keeps checking to see if time has elapsed, I think is what it's doing. And I'm just incrementing a counter to have some time elapse for it to see that. But my time and date are working, and I do have sitting over here, this right here is my real-time clock, so that is all functional. And then there's probably some other interrupts in here that I'm supporting, but those are the basics that I've really had to get up and running for this FreeDOS screen that you're seeing here to get this far. Now at this point I can come in here and I can do a directory. Now I will say that as I go through this, this is far from perfect. I have a lot of issues that I have already found, and I know I will find more here, but I'm excited just to have FreeDOS running to some level on my homebrew 286, so I think that's pretty cool. Over to the right, when you see those little dots, that's when it's doing some disk activity, and I can see those dots every once in a while that it's doing something. To the left, I can see my directory came back fine. I do see that, you know, my partition on that, the CF card I have in here is a 4 gig card, and I have a 450 meg partition, and I can see here I did a directory. This is the full FreeDOS installation. So any previous videos up to this point would have just had the kernel and a hidden file for the command interpreter, the command.com or freecom. At this point, this is the full installation, so I have folders or directories in here like FreeDOS. I have things like my fdauto.bat and an autoexec.bat. You know, and I can do things, let's see, I can say type. And now there's something, as I hit that key sequence, it threw an interrupt F, which I think is probably some error of some sort. So that's something I've got to go track down of why did I get that? Did I hit stuff too fast? Do I have an SPI communication issue? I'm using SPI to connect from my 286 to this Nano, and this Nano is fetching all the keyboard data. And so maybe something in there, I've got a timing issue or whatever it might be. I should mention too, I am running a 20 megahertz crystal down here going into the clock generator. So the system bus is running at 20, the processor internally runs at half of whatever that is, so it's running at 10 megahertz. So that might be pushing it for this setup, but and maybe that's where some of these errors could be coming in, but we'll see. I'll keep playing with it. But if I do type and I do an type fd auto.bat, you know, it then shows me what's in that, and all I'm doing is an echo off and echoing my empty fd auto.bat. I wanted fd auto.bat just to see if it would read it when I was previously running a debug version. This is a non-debug kernel. This is a kernel I did build just so I could set it with an 8086 as the processor, but other than that, the FreeDOS kernel is off the shelf. I've not modified it. I could also come in here and type, there's autoexec.bat, and I put that in there just so I don't get prompted with the date and time when the system starts up. I can do things like a CLS, and like there when I hit the C key, I got that IRQF again. That tells me there's a timing, there's something not going right. And I think it's SPI related, so I'll come back to it at some point. But if I do a CLS, that clears the screen, that works fine. That actually made an interrupt call, and in my BIOS I have the support to do that clear screen. And then I can do a dir again if I want. And you'll notice it didn't have all that disk activity the second time I did a directory. The first time I think it cached a bunch of stuff off the disk into memory. And then from here I can do things like, well, here's something I don't have in place yet. I don't have backspace functionality. I know that sounds silly, but I haven't put it in there yet. Easy to do. It's not going to take much to do it, but it's just one of 100 things on my list, so I just haven't gotten to it yet. So I'm going to change into the folder called FreeDOS. From there, let me just see if I do a directory of directories. I can see there's my directories, and I can change into bin. And I do notice on in some cases my enter key doesn't register every single time. The other ones are better, but the enter key, there's something a little slow there. I'm sure it comes back to the interrupt code I have, and I just need to, I would say, optimize it a bit yet. From here, I want to look at, let's just say, all of the executables, and let's see if DOS supports order of name. And it doesn't look like that worked, but let me try it again. So this is showing me all the executables. Not super fast on the video output here, but it's acceptable. So I'm going to try this one more time. Directory star.exe / order of name. And then I ran into that same, I'm almost going to repeat this one. And the N something in my interrupt routine isn't probably quite right the way I'm using that. Well, processing this little circular buffer for the keyboard input. So I'll have some more work to do there. Let me try it one last time, and then I'll just say forget it for this one, for the order of name. But I was going to see, can I do a dir star.exe /on enter? Yeah, it's like those keys are delayed for some reason, just a little bit. So I'll have to work on why that is happening. And yeah, so that order of name is supported. So now everything is shown alphabetically. And so these are all the executables in order of name that it's pulling off my CF card. Just simple things like this. I think that's pretty cool that that's all working. And then I can see it caught up and got the rest of my enters that would be my BIOS code that did get them into the buffer correctly. But then somewhere between FreeDOS and these other two interrupts that check for, is there anything in that keyboard buffer? I need to do some optimization there, figure out what's not quite right. Maybe one of them that I'll run, I'm going to do a clear screen. I'm going to run the debug. So this is kind of a neat one. And I saw that Ben Eater just recently posted a video where he's using debug. I think he's talking about Wozniak's original Wozmon and running that on a 6502. But here I'm coming in and I'm basically typing in debug, and I can type a question mark and get the help for that. And as I look at this, maybe something I want to do is I want to dump out. So it's a D, and I can say what address do I want to dump out. So I'll just dump out 0 starting at the beginning of my memory, and there's that first set of data. And every time I press enter, I think it just goes to the next piece of memory. So I can just work my way up and look at all the values in memory. And there's where I stored the SanDisk info, and I can see at what address is it at. That was again when I read this for its identification. But I can just keep reading through memory and see what's in there. Or I could say I want to dump and go to where my ROM starts, which would be C1000. And let's see if I can get that in here. I noticed something else took the capture off that screen for some reason. I don't know why. Okay. So then I'll go ahead and run that. But here I'm not getting, okay, there it finally went. So I'm going to give it a second since I probably hit enter a few times. Okay, so I'm going to go back and run that again, and I'm just going to type, so D for debug, space C0000. And I notice when I'm in debug doesn't run super fast on here, so I don't know what it's doing in the background. But I can tell it's slower than when I'm just out doing other things. And this is all optimization stuff I can try to figure out, well, why is it slow like that? So here though is my C1000, and I can start reading through that. And so this should be the beginning of my ROM, and I could probably test that pretty quickly and easily. I'll pull up a hex editor and let me just reopen the latest. So here's the latest that I have for a build of that ROM. But if I come down here, 31C088E, so that seems to match there and this output here. And then if I keep going down, I should get to this 21F, C6, 58. Yeah, that's all matching just fine. So this debug is working. And maybe if I just do a Q to get out of here and get back, should take me back to the command prompt. And there I'm back at the command prompt. Maybe I'll do a CLS. You know, other things that I might want to do is something like an edit. And if I type edit and I press enter, I see it starts to load, but then on my debug LCD over here, it's showing me interrupt 10, interrupt 1A was called, and I don't have support for that. It also threw a message over here that says it's asking for this. It's just giving me basically the information about what was my CDE. Well, A through D, general registers, again, my code segment, data segment, extra segment, etc. But that is a 1A, and so it's an interrupt 10, according to my LCD function 1A. So I could go pull up my interrupts and go to interrupt 10, which again is video BIOS, but 1A. And then if I look at this, it says AL will give me a 00 to get video display combo, or a 01 is to set video display combination. And so I got for an AL a 00. So it's trying to do a get video display combination, and then I need to have a BIOS function that supports that and returns one of these down here. And so in this case, I would probably return VGA with analog color display, I'm assuming is the one that I would use. So that means I need to go back to my code over here. I need to get to my VGA file. I need to come into this interrupt 10, and then I need to come back and say, okay, you were asking for 1A. I need to now insert in my logic here support for 1A, and probably have it return. So AL equals 1A if a valid function was requested. BL active display. I'm just reading through this active display. Yeah, so then BL looks like it needs to be one of these. So I would return an AL of 1A, a BL of probably 08. And so then at this point, I can see that FreeDOS probably made that call. It got no response from me, or I don't know what it would have gotten, basically, if I haven't implemented an interrupt service routine for that, and now I'm kind of stuck here. And so at that point, I'm just going to do a reset of my system, because it's not going to go any further. And so then I go through and I do the boot again. Oh, let's see. If I go into the FreeDOS bin folder again, you know, we can probably see, you know, are there any COM files or other things that might look interesting? Oops. A dir dot says do a directory of this folder. That's not what I intended to do. I don't have Control-C support yet. Another one of those quick things for me to do, but I just have to send the right, well, the character will come across from my nano to the computer, but I have not parsed it out the way I need to parse it. But I can see there's all kinds of stuff in this list that I could start playing with, and I don't necessarily use DOS much anymore, but I could see if there's anything in here. Maybe there's a vir command. Maybe that's one I can try running, or see what other ones are in here that look interesting. Uptime. You know, some of those are probably assuming that I have the proper counters. I mean, that was my first disk I/O. Here's where I see it doing some extra activity. I think it's, again, caching something at this point. Let me let that finish. It's finished. Okay, so let me just see if vir was in that list. Yeah, vir is in that list. And so that comes back and shows me which version. I don't know if there's any other things in here I want to try playing around with, but maybe I'll do directory star.exe, order of name. And I think I can do a /p for pause. I did notice that whatever FreeDOS thinks I have for supported number of lines does not match what I have here. Now keep in mind, I'm not scrolling, I'm just clearing the screen. But at some point it will prompt for a pause, and I can tell I don't have something with that interrupt supported right, so it won't work. But mem is interesting. I did try running that, and that does fail. And so I would have to track down why. Why does it fail? Oh, and actually maybe the any key will work. Let's see. Oh yeah, press any key. It did work. So it paused, but it paused after a lot more lines than it should have, which probably tells me that somewhere in one of my BIOS interrupt calls that's supposed to tell it how many lines of text I support, I'm not giving it a correct answer. So I'll track that one down. I don't think that's going to be a big deal. So that is what I've been doing, just kind of going through here and seeing, like there I got this little, probably this little function, interrupt F again. So again, I think it's something with my keyboard handler that I need to work on. But star.com, let's do order of name. Just going to see if there's anything in here that looks interesting. So I can maybe try running uptime, see what it does. Which, interesting. So that's not real helpful. And again, I don't think my Control-C works. And so then at that point, not happy. I'll do another reboot here. Maybe something else I could try doing is, what if I try to write to the disk? So everything I'm doing right now assumes that I have no disk access, and a lot of zeros there. So I'm going to try, I think on, that's probably not set up. I was going to say there is a FreeDOS command, I believe, reboot, but that's probably not going to work. I don't have path and all this other stuff set up. And there's an alias, I believe it sets up for that. But if I do something like, again, there's a directory listing. It's doing some initial reading of my disk. And I'm going to try to make a directory. This will fail because I have no support for writing. And then I can hear my computer beeping at me, and on the LCD it says 13, so it's an interrupt 13, and function 3 is what it's looking for. And so if I go back, interrupt 13, function 3 would be a write disk sectors. And I don't have that implemented. So if I come back over here to my code and I go to my disk, there is no interrupt 3. I've got 2 to read, but not a 3 to write. So I just have to get this put in. The code is actually quite similar, read and write. It's just, I believe when it comes into what function I'm going to call, I just have to tell it a different register, basically. Other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. So I don't think that's going to be a big deal. But that failed. And then, of course, FreeDOS at this point is expecting some response from that, and it's not going to get it. So it is locked up. But this is kind of just what I'm learning through. So just playing around, running different things, seeing what happens, what interrupts I'm missing. I'll slowly work through cleaning up, for example, my keyboard I/O that's still a little goofy yet. I'll work on my disk writing, maybe see if I can get some of this vertical scrolling working. I don't have a lot of optimism for this video card. I probably need to come up with a version that supports something a little bit better than just doing a pixel by pixel type of movement within the video RAM. I suppose that the other thing I could do is track the characters on the screen and then just redraw the characters, which would be pretty fast, but still not going to be fast enough. So what I've got here is probably good enough for now. And then at some point I might get in here and look at, for example, going to this games folder Now net would be great if I can ever get to the point of having a network card, which is in my list. I do have this sound card sitting over here that I want to get in the system, and I know it works from my BIOS. So then I'll probably try to write a driver for that. We'll see. Maybe I'll write a DOS type driver, or I'll just access it directly the way I've been doing it. But that's something else. But a network card would be great if I could leverage that at some point. We'll see. I don't believe FreeDOS has support for hardware network drivers, so I would have to kind of do my own thing, roll my own thing, and I'd probably use some little nano or something that I connect to the network and try to use that. But we'll see. But I should be able to go in and maybe play games, and I know there's zero chance that anything in this folder is going to work for me because this is all going to require some type of video capability that I don't have. Although, did I see Doom in there? Maybe I didn't. Let's see. Let me clear the screen and do a directory. Oh, Boom, not Doom. Let's go see what Boom is. I have no idea. And so then I do a directory and Boom. Is this some Doom knockoff? I don't know. Oh, and so I can't even load that. It says 386 is required. So bummer on that one. Well, and actually, I wonder. I'm just going to see what's in this text file. Oh, and there I got something out of that it really did not like. And so I managed to crash it. So I did a type, and I just typed out the contents of that folder, and you can see I got back something that it was quite unhappy. And back over here, I can see that same 0F. So there's something a little goofy that I've got to work through and figure out, is that related to the clock speed I'm running at or whatever it might be. So let's do type about text. And see if, okay, it didn't crash that time, but let me do one type about text. Okay, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. But what I might do, let me back up. Are there any other folders that look interesting? And I'll have to play with this offline and just see what is there even in here. EW Snake. Snake is always a pretty basic game, but I'm going to assume that even something as simple as a Snake type game is going to require something more than I have running. So I saw an EW Snake in there. Let me do a directory again. EW Snake. So that's the second game that said no DPMI. And so I'll have to figure out what is it looking for. And Hangman. And no go there. So those are the fun things I'll get to work towards. And I think the other thing I want to do sometime soon too is just go compile a C application real quick and see if I can copy that onto the CF card and run my own C or C++ app if that works. I would think it should at this point, as long as I'm sticking with just basic stuff like text input output. But good enough. So I think hopefully that gives you the idea that my 286, I guess, is quasi-functional with FreeDOS. I have a lot of work yet, a lot of interrupts I don't support, a ton of performance things that I'm going to have to work through. Some that I probably am not going to be able to overcome, like hardware scrolling on the video card. That's just not going to be something I'm going to be able to do. But I'll see what kind of progress I can make here coming up. And in the meantime, I'll start playing around with FreeDOS more too, probably on a different computer where I can see what things really look like. But I can see things that just catch my eye that I want to start working with, like test disk. What is that? I would assume something to test my CF card. Test disk. And 386 required, and DPMI. So I think I'm going to run into this pattern of a lot of stuff requiring a 386, and those I just simply won't be able to run. But then that makes me want to go start a 386DX build at some point. So we'll see if I get to that point or not. I think there's a lot here that I have yet to learn before I try to do something like that. I will continue to do some working and clean up here, and if I get to a better state here in a couple of weeks, I'll throw out an updated post to show just kind of where I'm at. If you've got questions on any of the stuff I've been doing, do let me know. I'll do my best to answer.